Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Broken Bridge Studio. Today we are doing a spindle and sphere. So after that hardwood, yellow wood bowl, I decided to switch gears a little bit, sharpen the chisels, and move on to basswood, a nice soft carving wood. I picked up these blanks over at like a Hobby Lobby kind of place, and I thought it'd be fun to throw them on the lathe here and go to town. Now, I'd freshly sharpened that roughing gouge, and I'd really had some trouble starting off. And you're seeing some stuttering. That's not a video artifact. That thing kept stopping. Every so often, it would just stop, and it would catch on the gauge and the gouge, and I couldn't figure out for the longest time what was going on. Turns out, when I hammered it into the mortise on the other side, that spindle mortise, I didn't hammer it in hard enough, and it was slipping on that. So the live edge was working, it was spinning, but every so often it would catch and wouldn't have the rotational energy didn't get conveyed into the wood appropriately. So it made it a little difficult to try to get this done the right way. Anyway, I figured it out eventually, but it took some time. I turned this down, got it to a nice round shape, and the goal here is I really wanted to kind of have a sphere in the center with two spindles and goblet stems kind of going out to bases on each side. So I had a vision in my head going into this and what it would look like, and I figured this would be a great piece to do it on. It's a narrow diameter, it's fairly small, it's given me a chance to break out this 7-inch rest, which I've never used before. And as you can see, I'm just still like having some trouble getting this thing down to round. I have a little bit of a flat edge and it keeps catching, just every so often it keeps catching, but I finally get it to round, and I'm pretty happy with that. So now it's time to do some measurements. So I'm trying to find the center here. I know that this thing's about 1.75 inches across, so I wanted to put 1.75 inch measurement across the middle, and then I use, you know what, I've got a caliper. Why don't I use that and try to find this exact measurement? So that's a little bit closer. So I'm going to use my pencil here, and while it's spinning, while the motor's activated, I'm going to draw in what I'm calling my demarc lines. So these will be the lines denoting the sphere that will be in the center of the spindle. Now I've got to remove a lot of material. So, and again, I'm having that catching issue. I'm using this skew gouge here and the skew scraper, and every so often it's just catching and stopping the material from spinning appropriately. So I still haven't quite at this point figured out what's going on, but eventually I do fix it. But you'll see here is that I'm, playing around with it. I've got a nice sharp chisel. I'm just trying to start to think about how I'm going to remove material. I start working here with this round nose scraper, getting in there, thinking about how I'm going to get this down from, well, it's about 1.75 inches right now in diameter, and I want to get that down to about 1/4 inch. I'm going to go to as small of the stem as possible, and while at the same time, not having this explode in half and fly across the room on this lathe. So I figured this was a good time to lay that down and try it out. So continuing on with this angled skew, really starting to take some material out, but again, every so often still catching and still not really turning in the right way. And I'm finding I've got to be applying a lot of force and trying to get this thing to go. So I learned a couple more things on this turn. First and foremost, I was told that the Sphere and Spindle, or I was reading up on the Sphere and Spindle thing, and it's supposed to be a complicated turn. It's supposed to be a challenge because you're doing internal coves and outward swoops, and something that I thought I'd challenge myself with, see if I could do this on this lathe, and see if I had the right kind of tools in order to do this. And I am pretty happy with the results, and I finally get into a really good motion here where this is starting to come down. I'm really kind of getting into a feel of how this is going to start to come together, and I do have that picture still in my mind. Right now, it looks a little bit more like a candy, like you'd pull apart that candy, like a wrapped candy with the twisted ends. Until I start taking down that center, and that's when that round nose scraper is really going to start to come into play. But I want as a flat of an edge, or as narrow of a spindle as I can when it intersects what is ultimately going to be the sphere in the middle. And you'll notice I'm not taking that sphere down right away. I really want to try to get these spindle legs going, just because the sphere is going to continue to remove off some of the corners just like that, and it happens fast. And if you're not careful, you can take this from a sphere, well, to something else entirely. And I didn't want to risk anything there, so I'm going to start to rough out what I think is basically the sphere shape, and I'm really not trying to hit that center. You'll notice that pencil line is not going to go away, and I'm doing that on purpose. I want to maintain that overall shape in the center, so I'm getting pretty close at this point. I'm liking the shape. I think it's coming out really well, but I really want to see like a lot skinnier spindle here. So I'm going to still have to remove a lot of material away from these goblet ends to make that spindle happen. Now, another thing I think I thought of afterwards was I had some rough ends. This was raw wood, and I'm not really doing anything to those exposed ends. When this thing was all said and done, I had to go put it on a belt sander to smooth out the rough ends. And in the future, I realized, a lot of guys use a parting tool. They actually cut off the ends of what they're working on so that they can create a really nice smooth finish with with that kind of a parting tool, the one I'm using right there. So I didn't think about that with this turn, but it's something I'm going to keep in mind for the future turns. Is that I think that would actually be something that would be useful, or even maybe like a Japanese pole saw or something, just to like slice off the rough end and really maintain a nice smooth surface of the bottom of these things. But my goal here, like I said, is to make these sort of rounded goblet ends here, the golf tee looking things. I don't know what else you'd call them, kind of the spindle shapes, and then get that sphere to start turning. And it really is turning out, well, pretty good, actually. Um, I'm finding I'm utilizing a lot of the tools. I'm switching back and forth between the skews. I'm switching back and forth between the parting tool, and then I'm going to the round nose scraper. And each one of them is doing something a little bit different. The skew is removing that straight material. The parting tool right there is removing material directly on the spindle, and I'm really getting those down to a level where I like it right now. And then that round nose scraper is kind of smoothing it all out. So I'm really liking this. And even though I noticed right there, and you probably did too, I had a little smooth spot on the edge of that goblet stem or on the end of that flared base, and so I had to turn that down just a little bit more because I just noticed it. So anyway, I think I'm at an appropriate size and the shape right now. I'm really liking how this is coming together, so time to start sanding. And I'm going to speed this up and actually skip over a bunch of the sanding parts. So here's the basic sanding strips we've seen before. And this is fun because now I'm starting to get into the coves and starting to get into the edges and some tight areas. And I'm, again, playing around with how I can sand these things, and especially in the tight corners. Uh, so as you'll notice, the pencil mark disappeared. As soon as I hit it with that first grit sandpaper, the pencil mark is long gone. And it's pretty cool. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit with some sanding sponges. I skipped over a bunch of the sanding strips there. But fast forwarding here and sanding sponges, let's jump ahead again to our higher grit. Knocking all this down, putting a really nice finish shine. Basswood doesn't have a ton of grain within the wood, but it will have a really beautiful natural wood luster. And as I started doing this, it really started to pop and come out here. I think the end goal for this, I just wanted to finish it as naturally as possible. So I actually have some cellulose sanding sealer and some wax, and I figured out finally how to use the wax, and I'm going to clean all this up. I'm going to vacuum it all off, as you can see here. And I'm going to put down some paper towels and then apply this kind of flammable solvent sealer based stuff. And it worked out pretty well. As you can see, it's just a really nice natural wood right there. There's the very fast Mylons. But it's just a polish, and it's a really nice oil polish. It's got a little bit of a lacquer kind of thing to it. And the idea is that when you get this on, and you can see right there, that wood grain just really explodes. It keeps that natural hone of the wood. It keeps the natural shape, the luster, and everything else. And then from there, you can wax it. And the wax is what's then going to really bring out a luster. And so that little wax stick has deposited just a small amount of wax on the surface, and I've gone with the hot towel, basically melted the wax into everywhere, making it nice and smooth. So there it is, and I'll post a couple photos, and thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the Sphere and Spindle, and stay tuned for the next ones. Thanks. Bye.